complicated concept like cryptocurrencies explained simply.
Let's get started.
How to research before investing.
How blockchain works.
Hopefully going to answer all your questions for you.
Investments in crypto assets are subject to volatility, market, and other risks. Please research carefully before investing. Terms and conditions of the exchange apply.
Of Business Today's most powerful women in business. Since 2003, Business Today has honored and celebrated the rise of women in business and economy through this flagship event. We at Business Today kicked off the most powerful women selection process in June last year with an initial list of 200 women recommended by industry veterans, past winners, and peers, besides BT editors and reporters. MPW 2021 has two categories: women business leaders in India and Indian women abroad who have made a difference in the global arena in the past year. Winners this year include first-generation entrepreneurs, marketing wizards, banking leaders, manufacturing CEOs. We have a record 17 debutantes showing the rise of women in leadership positions across India Inc. And we are pleased to have many of them with us here today. To kick things off this evening, I'd like to welcome on stage editor, Business Today, and the force behind this power issue, Saurav Majumdar.
Thank you, Abha. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to you on behalf of the India Today Group and Business Today to what promises to be an absolutely marvelous evening. This evening is special for a number of reasons. We are meeting against the backdrop of India turning 75 and Business Today turning 30. This evening is a celebration of the enormous achievements of India's women across several sectors and despite several challenges. The winners of Business Today's 18th Most Powerful Women list are examples of how it is possible to dream big and make them come true and break barriers in the process. This is a time when Indian enterprise and innovation are the toast of the world. And our MPW winners, whom we felicitate tonight, brilliantly demonstrate that. The women who we felicitate tonight are achievers whose leadership, strategic skills, and influence set them apart. Their intellect, their vision, and above all their will to succeed are what they make them truly powerful. I'm also delighted to inform you that this year's MPW list has as many as 17 debutants, the highest ever since the list was launched. Our list also has what we call a Hall of Fame, where 7-time winners are placed. This gives room to celebrate newer faces, bring in newer achievers who are making their mark in the world of business and enterprise. There are also 12 women who returned to our list after a hiatus, which is also evidence that these women leaders are persevering on their chosen paths and continue to scale new heights of success. Ladies and gentlemen, over the course of this evening, we will listen to many women achievers as they share their thoughts and success stories with us. But despite these many successes, India has still a long way to go in reaching true gender parity. There's a lot of ground still left to cover, as we all know. Female participation in the labor force is still at just around 20%, and the World Economic Forum's Gender Gap Report places India at 148th position among 150 countries. A recent Deloitte report, on the other hand, shows women hold only 17.1% of board seats in India. More tellingly, while this number has increased a bit from 2014, the year when the Companies Act of 2013 mandated having one woman member on every board, the number of women chairing boards has actually fallen to just 3.6%, down 0.9% since 2018. However, there's some progress being made in terms of women taking up CEO roles in India. There are 4.7% female CEOs now against 3.4% in 2018. That's some movement forward. But in the overall context, these numbers are still very, very low. And that's why the MPW list, which celebrates the power of women achievers, is even more important. As more and more companies across the world are finding out, it makes sense, an eminent business sense, to have a gender diverse workforce. And Indian business leaders too are beginning to play their role in ensuring women get increasing representation across their companies, in leadership positions as well. The government too, in fact, is playing an important role in making this happen. We have a woman finance minister now who is actually navigating this economy through choppy waters pretty ably. And only recently, we have the SEBI getting its first ever woman chairperson. That's some movement forward as well. And if these are any indications, we are on the right path. On this note, I welcome you to this celebration of true women achievers this evening. And I welcome you and thank you very much for sparing time this Saturday evening and being with us. Do enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Saurav. I'd like to introduce our first panel today. Post the pandemic, we saw the emergence of country's first female-led unicorn, Nykaa, valued at $13 billion on listing. It marked the coming of age of a new era of women leaders across India, Inc. These women are not only building and running giant companies, they are at the forefront of creating change, whether it be technology, content, sustainability, or empowerment. They are working to put into place new thoughts and structures that will really take the next generation way ahead into the future. Join me in welcoming Dipali Goenka, CEO and Joint MD, Wellspun India, Jyoti Deshpande, CEO, Viacom 18, Anjali Bansal, founder, Avana Capital, and Preeti Rathi Gupta, founder, Lakshmi. In conversation with me.
So I was chatting with everyone just before we began, and before we even got into specific themes, the first thing that all the women here said today was, why do we still have to classify gender? And I must admit, the narrative in the last 3 years... Is it working now? Okay. And I must admit, the narrative in the last 3 years has really changed. It's changed from being about gender to being about equal opportunity. So I want to start off today by asking each of you how you're inculcating a culture where we see equal opportunity. You're from very diverse fields, and each of you has been a thought leader. Each of you has been incredibly progressive in your thinking, what you're trying to implement in the workplace, and the kind of change that you're striving to deliver through your work. Jyoti, let me start off with you.
Sure. Thank you very much. I think before I answer your question, I want to give an example from my industry. I think recently everyone would have heard of Gangubai. Yes. You know, Alia Bhatt, Sanjay Leela Bansali, Mafia Queen. There's a woman hero in the movie. So that's, women making waves in my line of work. How many of you heard of writing with fire?
Anyone?
Has anyone heard of Writing with Fire? It's basically a documentary which is up for the Oscars. It's based on the real life of Dalit women who were the first to set up publishing. So there's a lady called Meera, who's editor of the first women's only Dalit magazine. So, we talk about gender, but there's underlying constructs to it like class, caste, which make it even more difficult for women from these places. So I think celebrating these kind of women, using the power of storytelling to bring out some of these stories to light is something that we want to actively do. But to go back to your question.
And I'll add to it, because what you're also pointing towards here is it's about diversity and inclusion. It's not just about gender. But I wonder if that's a corporate buzzword or whether that can actually be implemented more successfully in large corporate houses.
So, short answer, I'm trying to walk the talk. 60%, maybe 70% of my leadership team are all women. So my CFO, CHRO, Chief Creative Officer, Chief Marketing Officer, and many more are women leaders.
All right. Dipali, what about you? And you deal with women from a very different background because you're dealing with women at factories, in smaller towns. Is there a different challenge in ensuring inclusivity there?
Abha, it is. When you talk about textiles, it's predominantly male-dominated. When I started at Wellspun in 2010, there were just 8% women. Today we have 26% women. The important part of what we did actually, why women were not coming, we did a multitasking program where it was not just the women who were working, but the man of the house had, also had to respect what the woman was doing. And I think that's where the journey began for us. And after that, now today, it is not just the women workforce on the shop floor, even women in the corporate floor. We call this program called the Women of Wellspun, where, these women mentor women in the offices, women at the factories. And I think that's very, very important because it's not just about, because I think when you start working, you should not be just alone. And I think here are women who mentor them through their experiences, guide them. There's a help desk where women can reach out to. So I think that's important to create that environment. Because I think fundamentally when you talk about diversity, it is not just about having women, but also having the peers respect them, creating that environment for them, and even the ecosystem back home. I think that's what we saw in COVID as well, Abha, where women really went through a lot of challenges because it was not just about handling work, it was handling home, children, everything. So I think there should be somewhere they can go to and reach out to as well.
Okay. You also make a very conscious effort, Dipali, like Jyoti was saying. But tell us, in terms of percentage of women at the factories, how that's changed. You said 8% when you first started, but give us a sense of what it's really like now, because I know that this is a very, very emotional, passionate area for you, and you also work towards this very consciously.
So today, on my shop floor itself, I have around 24% women. And, it is not just about the factories, but for Wellspun, it was a responsibility to create the ecosystem around the factories as well. So I have a program called Spun, where we upcycle rags that are generated at our factories, and women make rugs and cushions out of it. women couldn't even sign and operate a bank account. So, we did an adult literacy program. Because I think at Wellspun we believe that if a woman is empowered, the child is definitely going to school. So this program, now we have around 200, 300 women working in the communities. It starts from there. And I think, Abha, for me, I'll just quote one example. When I talked about this program, which I tied up with Swasti as an NGO, with one of the biggest global retailers in America, Avni Bhadra is one of the girls who was chosen out of, 1,000 factories of Walmart, actually, to be, flown from Anjar to Arkansas. Wow. What it did was it created many more Avni Bhadras at Wellspun. And I think that's very important too.
Amazing and so inspiring. Anjali, you're spearheading change in a very different way, through technology and also through the host of startups that you identify across the board, and also now in the area that you're clearly looking at building sustainability. So let's take it one by one. And first share with us how you feel you can see the nature perhaps of the current generation of founders changing in terms of the kind of problems they're trying to solve. What are you encouraging them to do and build?
Great question, Abha. Let me start first with acknowledging what the statistics that Saurav laid out, right? Which is true. We have had a decline in female labor force participation. What is often said about India is whatever is true, the opposite is equally true. So we now have a history of very strong women leaders. We've had many women leading banks, financial institutions, a female president, female prime minister, female defense minister, which most other countries don't have. And yet we have increasing violence against women. We have declining labor force participation. If I look back at my own journey, in my entering engineering class, we were 15 girls out of 350. If you do the math, it's less than 5%. Today they say it's closer to 30% entering women in engineering classes. Now, taking technology as an area where there are fewer women. But you don't see the same reflection on the output side. So in some ways, I think on the input funnel, at least in certain segments, we seem to be getting there. The slope of the curve is in the right direction, and yet we don't see women in leadership or even middle management roles. So there is a leaky pipeline issue. I think one of the things we should explore and really aim to address so that 10 years later we are not having the same conversation is why are there not more women? Because there are 50% women in the world, so why should we not have more women? We are seeing also a very positive trend in the entrepreneurial space. So on the one hand, globally and in India as well, very dismal statistics. Between 3 to 5% of all venture money goes into female-funded startups. And yet, anecdotally, literally over the last 5 years, I have personally seen, and we have as an industry seen, the rise of some absolutely innovative, technology-led, fantastic, women-led startups which are getting funded not because they're women. The business of investing is all about generating returns. So we've invested in a company called Arogya.ai. Arogya is doing precision antimicrobial drug resistance research. There is Brainsight that is doing brain neural mapping, 2 PhDs. Animal, the first ever cattle marketplace started by 2 women, both ex-Pratilipi. And you talked about Nykaa. Falguni has really blazed the trail, and I think we need more role models like that. I've been very fortunate. I was very fortunate to be an early investor in Nykaa, and I think it's just so inspiring. And she has broken all the molds, all your stereotypes of it needs to be, forgive me, but 3 guys from IIT who start a company. Not the case, and shown what success looks like. So we can keep going, but I see both very positive trends, and at the same time I see how in some ways the bias continues. It's still not an old boys club, but a young boys club. We have seen a very positive trend on board representation, where we've gone from 3.5% women on boards 15 years ago, closer to 20% now, supported by legislation, but maybe that's what it takes. So I'll pause there.
All right. Preeti, share with us, you've been looking at empowering women in terms of, financial knowledge and taking the leap on that front, whether it be through, of course, your own company, as well as outside of that, angel investing and so much more. Tell us, how you see the future.
Thank you, Abha, and thank you, Business Today, for having me here. So I think, firstly, I come from an absolutely male-dominated field, right? Financial services, at least 15 years back, was as male-dominated as possible. I think the onus of being, or at least leading organizations, one responsibility is that you build diversity. And today diversity has a lot of, lot of tangents to it. But at that point in time, it was just having some sort of female representation, women representation in teams. I think as women leaders, I think within the company, we've always driven that. As part of my parent company, we made sure that we are driving, getting that percentage from a 17 to a 35% now. It has been not easy. And I think my deep insight there was that one of the reasons, so, like Anjali mentioned, I think to get more women in the funnel to really rise up and take up leadership roles, where do they drop off and why do they drop off? And one of the biggest reasons was just, having that financial freedom and not really being able to, or having to compromise on a lot of decisions. I think COVID times we've seen more than enough where women have actually dropped from the workforce because they had to make a choice. And a lot of times that compromise where they were not able to pursue their career. So I think that was a deep insight which led me to then form Lakshmi. And I think in some way it is rewriting the rules at Lakshmi, which is one, I think, a team which is, we are actually now looking at building reverse diversity, right? We have a team right now which is 90% women. But also we realize that's not healthy as well, so getting that in. But rewriting those rules, right? Saying that why can a financial services company or a fintech not just be, have a larger percentage of women as well running it? And I think we are exemplifying that in every which way. And beyond that, I think just getting this whole piece of financial freedom, because I think that's a very, very important aspect when it comes to women in workforce, having to compromise on personal front, professional front. I think to us at Lakshmi and to me personally, that's that one piece that we want to really drive and change. And I think for all of that, I think we've been talking blind. What we've done is really dug out data. We've worked on data. We've done a study where we've said, okay, across a metro city, tier 1, tier 2, and we're not, this is across the board, look at personas, single, married with children, or divorced women. What are they doing? What's happening with their money management? I think working on data gives you that ability to then have real actionable, deep actionable impact. So that's one part of what we're doing.
Jyoti, are you a tough boss?
I am a good mix of compassion and I mean business when I mean business.
Okay, because that's the biggest complaint on the gender front, that our bosses either forced to be more empathetic or are they more biased toward women employees because they're women? How do we neutralize this debate?
So I think at the leadership level, there's no gender. You're a leader. You could be a man, you could be a woman, you're just a leader. And you have to come to the party, you have to show up and do your bit. So I don't think I treat men and women differently at that level. And I encourage mentorship. I believe that men or women should seriously mentor, their proteges. And I encourage more my women leaders to mentor other women. What I find is actually women are toughest on other women. It is absolutely true that, she mentioned boys club. Our sisterhood somehow is not that strong. चाह के भी हम उतना strong नहीं हो पाते. The boys club managed to, fight as a pack. कहीं ना कहीं हम बिखर जाते हैं.
You've hit a nerve there. Everyone's going to have a word on this, right? And I've had multiple conversations with Anjali on this for sure. She's just being very cool right now. But Anjali, jump in, because you've often said that women will have to go for it. They'll have to fight that extra punch in order to make sure they get that opportunity or claim that opportunity.
So listen, we can't wish it away. there are biases. The only way you can address something is first acknowledging that it exists. So let's acknowledge there is a bias. That bias exists, whether it's in society or in organizations. Let me break it up into 4 pieces. So you have the state, the country, laws. You have organizations, companies, institutions. Then you have families and society. And you have the individual. I think for the most part, progressive states around the world have done their bit. Laws exist for wage parity, for harassment, for generally well-intentioned laws around benefits. They may have unintended consequences, but generally laws are good. Institutions, for the most part, mean well. Progressive companies, again, in India, around the world, are trying, actually genuinely trying hard to attract, retain, grow women, or at least they say so. Then it comes back to all of this exists in the context of the family and society. And you cannot make change happen till attitudes change. So really we are fixing the hardware by fixing systems and processes and policies. We now actually have to work on the software of culture and mindsets. And families have to accept this, and she has to want it enough. It's not easy. All of us sitting here are a privileged lot. Most women coming through or in the workforce today don't have a choice really. They have to do the work at home and they have to do the work at work. So how will we get to equitable workplaces if we don't have equitable home places?
Dipali, your story is an example of this, in someone who kind of defied convention and joined the business. Your husband, of course, was very supportive. But perhaps you can share that with us to give us an example of how culture can be changed.
So I think out of all of us here, I got married at the age of 18, and I started working when my girls were 10 and 7. I come from a conservative community, the Marwari community, where boy plays a very important part. And I didn't want that for my daughters. I wanted to get into work, to lead by an example for my daughters. I didn't want them to just see the way it was. And I think that's where my journey began, Abha. And interestingly enough, while Anjali, you said we were the privileged lot, but it wasn't that for me as well, coming from, being the promoter. But I worked as a professional where it was even starting spaces for home and then leading Wellspun India from the front. The integral part of what I think I can talk about myself is that we need to take everything in our hands. The responsibility to lead, the responsibility to mentor, the responsibility to set an example in the organization where more women can find a safe place. Today for me at Wellspun, I have an open door policy where women can reach any time and lead out. I mean, you have the posh communities, you have everything. But before that, it wasn't there. So I think, Abha, for me, my journey began, from the opposite end of the spectrum. But today, proud to say that my younger daughter has a startup for young women, entrepreneurs called Cool Kanya. So I think I would have done something good out there.
Preeti, you talked about data and analysis that you've done of different women and profiles across India. Would you be able to share with us a key challenge you see across some of these metrics? How would you define it? How can we tackle some of these challenges? Because like Anjali said, unfortunately the numbers are fairly sobering. Despite the fact that we have more leaders at the top end of the spectrum, overall we still have the same percentage of participation in the workforce.
So the study that we've done at Lakshmi is more around what women are doing with their money. Do they have the power to, even if they are earning or saving, do they have the power to really decide what they want to do with it? And if they do, what are they doing with it, right? Of course, the numbers are very jarring, but I think overall what it tells you, this study, is that as women, we are putting ourselves last. Whether it is money management, whether it is our career, whether it is our personal aspiration, I think we're putting ourselves last. The study says less than 1% women are actually thinking about or planning about their retirement, or 4% about their own financial security. Major goals are child's education, family security, and I think that sort of, I think it flows down to every level, right? And which is why I think when it comes to career, acha, family needs me more, maybe, you know, I will just probably look at the family, my children need me more. I think this whole conversation, and I'm actually very glad to say that when we look at the millennials and the Gen Z, I think that is rapidly changing, whether it's tier 1, tier 2, because of just the access to, you know, knowledge, exposure, everything that you are doing. I think women are far more aspirational. I think they are able to sort of say, yes, I will work, you know, I will do this. I think we are moving from that, you know, that point where I think women had to work, and I take Dipali's point, where even if you started working, privileged or non-privileged, you still had to prove yourself, not just to your workplace, but to your family. You know, there have been instances where I felt that, okay, I have to prove myself to my children as well, for them to really understand that I'm doing something meaningful. And I think from there, we are moving to a point where we are saying, okay, women are doing this for themselves, not to prove a point around. But, you know, I wish I could say this across all socio-economic, you know, bands or demography. Unfortunately, I think there is still, you know, within, beyond the urban spaces where we feel that women are still struggling to kind of put themselves ahead. Huge hopes, I think, what Cool Kanya is doing, what we are doing at Lakshmi, I think that's sort of, that's the end goal, that, you know, put yourself first. Think about yourself.
All right. So Jyoti, what's the way forward now? You talked about, you know, I love that you brought up the right...
Sisterhood.
Yes, right in the beginning. You know, and I can see how passionate you are about some of the work that's bringing, you know, issues to light around women and different situations in the country. But what's your aim? You're all winners here today, and you're some of India's most powerful women in business at the forefront of change. You know, what are you imagining now going forward?
See, I'd like to address a couple of points that you raised. You know, you talked about the leaky bucket. And, you know, most of the time when a bunch of women get together, we are on panels like this, it all comes across ultra-feminist, you know, we're burn the bra, let's, you know, and there's so much sort of aggression around it. That is not, I think there is a whole lot of subconscious bias. So we try and position it as, is it someone else's fault that women are not coming forward? I also want to introspect. Women, there are enough girls in education. Out of self-choice, they take certain parts of careers and drop themselves out of the reckoning for certain jobs, even as they go through higher education, thinking, main to, you know, because there's a subconscious bias that there'll be shadi, there'll be bacha, there'll be... So culturally, a whole new culture generation has to change, where men and families, the way our cultural thinking takes women as inclusive. And women themselves have to not, you know, drop themselves out of the race. And that will only happen through a very subconscious change in culture. Of course, we will all do actively what we are doing, but I think a whole different generation, thought leadership and change in thinking has to happen to really move the needle. We're talking about 4%, we're talking about 102 or 110 out of 135, or, you know. So I think we are a long way off. I know every little thing matters, but I think a cultural shift is required.
Dipali, let me get closing comments from you as well. And, you know, really what's next for you? Because, you know, you are at the forefront of the sustainability agenda. You've been at the global stage, you know, representing Welspun and India as a leader. What's next?
I think when you talk about next, I think today we are here. I think the sustainability and ESG is going to be a very important aspect of what we do at Welspun. I mean, for me, I think the important thing is textile is the biggest polluter. The maximum landfills come out of textiles. what are we doing here? So I think for us, we use 0 drop of water, fresh water at our textile manufacturing plant, so that the farmers get water for farming and there's potable water in the communities. The rags are getting upcycled and our story starts from scrapyard. And of course, empowerment is a very important part of what we do. And whether it's the communities, whether it's the women workforce, or whether the women in STEM, whether in data or analytics, because I think let's face for Wellspun, I think it's not just, we're not a manufacturer, at that. It's just not about textiles. We are managing vendor managed inventories for the biggest retailers across the world. We manage their supply chain. We're managing retails in the country, in India, in UK as well, and of course e-commerce, and of course the digital analytics, and for that you will need women. It is rightly said that, to reach that $1 trillion GDP and a 50% of women population, that is not going to work. We're not going to achieve our goals.
All right. Anjali? So, Ruth Bader Ginsburg very famously once said, where should women be? They should be everywhere decisions are being made. So, with a yay for RBG, and I also want to call out a sisterhood. Abha's Ladies Who Lead is creating a very, very interesting group, and I see a lot of LWL members here. That's great. But I think to solve problems, if you are solving the problem of inclusivity or inclusion, then the dialogue also has to be inclusive. So I hope we don't have all women panels again, talking about women's problems, because diversity and inclusion is not a women's issue. It is everybody's issue. For most of my generation, we've had amazing, wonderful men who have been our sponsors, mentors, teachers, spouses, who have not just been supportive, but enabling, and real partners. Our birth families, our marriage families. I see Mr. Kamath sitting there. ICICI Bank is a tremendous example, and my own mentor, Mr. Vagul, for so many years. And I think if you ask him, what did they do? They were gender blind. I think all of us, and Jyoti said this, right? When you walk in as a leader, as a board member, as a CEO, you have to check your gender in at the door. You're responsible to your stakeholders, shareholders. Let me spend a minute on sustainability as well. So sustainability, honestly, is the next digital. What digitization was for the last 20 years, it used to be little ERP running, there was no CTO, there was IT. Today, digital is embedded in every aspect of a business function. Going forward, sustainability is not a nice to have, it's not CSR. It has to be embedded in every single business function. So whether it's R&D, it's product, it's go-to-market, big capital wants it, consumers want it, our communities, employees want it, and consequently integrated business models will have to develop. It's the next big opportunity. So at Avana, we actually invest behind climate and sustainability. So it's not a quote-unquote ESG fund. It's actually our investment strategy. It is the next big digital.
Absolutely, and it's been making headlines, in fact. Preeti, closing comments from you then. And I want to also ask, because you mentioned financial services, and that debate's going to now move on to some of the other sessions we have. We have perhaps seen the decline of some of the major women that were perhaps at the forefront of financial services. Do you see more women around you since you're in it?
You mean in financial services? Absolutely. So I think, we've had, and we continue to have, women come at the helm, like Saurav mentioned, finance minister, SEBI chair. I think that is a great, it is aspirational for women, and I think when you see somebody there, it just gives you the idea this is possible, right? I think I agree, with everybody, everything that everybody here has said. But to me, I think one of the important, for example, even when you talk about sustainability, I think women naturally are aligned towards sustainability, better environment, better future for their children. But tell me, when a woman who is sitting just struggling with her finances, not knowing, her first thing is not, how do I do this right? Do I do the wet kachra and the, dry kachra separate? It's more, how do I manage my family finances, or how do I manage to get this for my child or for myself, right? And I think therefore, different levels, different things have to be done. I totally agree that this conversation at every level needs to include men. It cannot be just women talking about this or changing the world or changing the way things are. So hopefully we will have more men on the panel. But I think at every level, sort of driving this, having these conversations is important. I also feel that I think we have done this so often, right? We've had this conversation so often. I think we need to little internalize and say, why is this not changing, and why do we need to start at grassroots level and change things there?
Do you think they're intimidated? That's the men. That's why they don't join us on these panels.
I don't think so. I think we have to invite them in.
No, I don't think so.
Solutioning can only happen when it is actually inclusive. I sit on several large boards, and I keep getting asked this question, oh, do they accept what you say? It's sort of a duh question, because if not, then why am I there? And at least I have not had that problem. And I hope that women who do have that problem don't sit quiet about it. You can always vote with your feet.
And I think one thing that you need to, that every woman needs to remember, especially in the corporate world, in fact anywhere, right? You leave gender outside. When you walk into your workspace, into board meetings, you leave that outside, because you are probably judging yourself more strongly that I'm a woman. Should I speak? Should I not say? Am I going to say the right thing? Am I going to be judged? I think we have to just completely let go of that, because you are there because of your your ability.
You know, we are sitting here, but I know when I got onto Wellspun, people didn't, believe that I will be running the company. So when I was interviewed, oh, you are the designer in the company, are you? So, and in textiles, the boys' club does exist. But I think we got to break the norm. We got to take it in, and we got to have that diversity, where you have the peers around you who can respect you, creating that supportive ecosystem. It's not just about the women supporting women. It is that ecosystem that you got to create. I think that's going to be very, very integral to whatever we do going forward.
I think, Saurav, the message is clear. Next time we've got to have a debate. All of these wonderful, powerful leaders have been breaking the bias in every which way. It is Women's Month. Break the Bias is the theme. I'd like to give them all a huge round of applause. Thank you.
Complicated concept like cryptocurrencies explained simply.
Let's get started. How to research before investing.
How blockchain works.
Hopefully going to answer all your questions for you.
Investments in crypto assets are subject to volatility, market, and other risks. Please research carefully before investing. Terms and conditions of the exchange apply.
She has been a long-time advocate for greater gender diversity in the tech sector. In her book, Lean In, she writes, I do believe it's every woman's duty to stand up and support women around her who are less fortunate or privileged than others. Amazing things happen when women help other women. Here is her virtual message to all of us this International Women's Month.
It's an honor to join you for Business Today's 18th annual Most Powerful Women event. The women we're celebrating today have not only achieved remarkable things in their own fields, but they're an inspiration for the next generation, showing millions of girls in India and around the world that they can dream big. That inspiration is needed now more than ever, because COVID is not just a health crisis and an economic crisis. It's also been a crisis for women and girls. Women are more likely to have lost their jobs during the pandemic, or to have had their hours or pay cut. They're more likely to have had to take on extra caring responsibilities for children or relatives, and more likely to feel overwhelmed or stressed or anxious. In India, As of last August, the unemployment rate for women was double that of men. Here and globally, female-run businesses have closed at a higher rate than ones run by men. Of course, while women's experiences are different in different countries and cultures, it's been true everywhere that women have had fewer opportunities at work and more responsibilities at home. These challenges aren't new, but they're more urgent than ever. We have an opportunity to improve the way we work with more gender-inclusive policies around remote working, flexible working, childcare, and child-giving. Gender equality is good for everyone. Organizations that prioritize women's advancement perform better. Inclusive, sustainable growth is good for economies. That's why female leadership matters so much. Your leadership matters. I hope you all leave here today with a spring in your step, inspired by some amazing women, and determined to be an enabler of change in whatever way you can. Thank you.
I'd now like to welcome a very special guest. KV Kamath was the CEO, of course, at the helm from 1996 to 2009 at ICICI Bank, and it was known for offering opportunities to women at a time of rapid expansion following the economic liberalization of India. ICICI emerged as a training ground for senior female executives in Indian banking, and Mr. Kamath is renowned for his mentorship of senior women leaders. As an industry icon, staunch supporter of women in leadership, today it gives us great pride to welcome him here at the Business Today Most Powerful Women Awards. In conversation with Saurav Majumdar, editor, Business Today magazine. Gentlemen, please come on stage.
Mr. KV Kamath, thank you very, very much for joining us this evening. And as you have seen, we have been really, really privileged to be, graced by your presence this evening. You have mentored so many people who are so many, in terms of leadership roles now leading various organizations, the latest being the Securities and Exchange Board of India. I will therefore, taking off from some of the comments made in that very interesting session Abha moderated just before me, I will ask you some things relating to that. You are known and respected for having mentored women leaders at ICICI Bank all through your tenure across levels, many of whom have done excellently well, as I just said. And yet, as I mentioned in my opening address, not enough is being witnessed in terms of women leadership, women's participation in the workforce, women representation on the boards. What are your initial thoughts on this, and what do you think we can do to rectify that?
Thank you, Saurav. I think the answer lies in our previous session. Most of the answers and the challenges, and through those challenges, the answers have already been spelled out. So it may be probably best if I put a few things in context, and that probably gives our perspective on what happened in the bank during those years. Anjali mentioned Mr. Wagul. It was indeed Mr. Wagul who laid the foundation by basically opening the doors to women leaders. Well, they were women professionals. They graduated to be leaders much later. So that set the path. That was the first thing that happened. So you need a funnel, and that also was mentioned. And we probably created that funnel due to the foresight of my predecessor. We kept that going, but very quickly we found a challenge that was there. Biases, that are also mentioned. And you had to actively work on how to get those biases out. The biases primarily are on two fronts. A male bias, which I would say goes like this, that, oh, this cannot be done by a woman. And that is something that has to be kept firmly out of the door. There is no job, at least that I have seen, that a woman cannot do. And if you acknowledge that, and that is very difficult for many men to acknowledge, then I think the path gets smoother. So we then built, I would say, a team of women leaders who could take that decision very easily. And in a way, the men did not take the decision, the women took that decision for themselves. I will just add one more. There are a few more which are also mentioned, and I'll put them in our context. The second is, in terms of the next opportunity, equal pay and the next opportunity. If you have a history where it is men leaders in the HR department who have made these decisions, you are going to be left behind whether you want or not. So you need to make sure that the decision-making process, at time when you are evaluating progress and looking at opportunities, both ways, has got a strong base of women leaders also who shape that decision. I'm not going to use the word influence the decision, but shape the decision so that it is fair and it is without bias. These are the two things. The third thing we will discuss as we go along was also mentioned, that is the challenges that happen as you go along your career on two fronts. Primarily the family front. The challenges on the family front, there are several of them. Some of them were mentioned, but in our case, the most frequently seen challenge was, my husband has moved to Singapore. I need to go. And I had women leaders who would actually challenge the woman leader and say, why do you have to go? Why doesn't he stay back? So these sort of challenges need to be asked. So, but the key, as I say, is have a broad funnel and completely eliminate bias from your mindset. Then you are making progress. You're not getting there, but you're making progress.
Sir, there's also been an opinion at earlier forums, one has heard this being said, by women leaders in fact, saying that there is, because of this bias, this deep-rooted biases being there in the workplace, not enough women actually put up their hands and stand up and be counted for senior leadership roles. And of course, there's the other part where, it is assumed that you will not be up for it in terms of your ability to devote time to that role. Do you think that's changing, or do you think that continues?
I think, frankly, it is, to me, again, sorry to say, a male-centered view which, has gotten embedded and creates a challenge for women leaders. And it's, again, part of the bias process. I'll give you a story and how a bias comes in and how you then, the bias, if it's not corrected, grows. This is very early on. I had just come back in '96 as CEO, and one day I was clearing proposals which are going to the board, and there were 4 or 5 professionals around me, and I think 2 of them were women. And I knew that all worked very hard because we got very tight deadlines. So I asked, and this is '96, things weren't very comfortable in Mumbai. So I asked one of the women leaders, what time did you go home yesterday? And she said, I went home at 1 o'clock. So I asked the next question, which had to follow, were you comfortable going home and how did you go home? She said, I took a taxi. And she looked at me. So that basically gave me the answer that this is my bias that is asking that question. So we did take some steps because we did not want to say that you are not going to work late, but we took some steps. Discreetly we said, if somebody is working late beyond 10 o'clock, we will arrange for a car to take you home. And this was going to be once a month or so. It was not going to be a daily thing that got settled. We had a similar challenge when we said we will run our branches 8 to 8, 2 shifts, because we had limited number of branches and a lot of things to do. Again, women cannot do this job. And there again, there it was interesting. No woman leader said, I am not willing to do this job. I don't think I had a single instance of that. But there would be parents-in-law calling in and saying, my daughter-in-law or my daughter is coming home at 9:30. And typically my colleague Lalita, at the time Joint Managing Director, would field these calls. And she would actually calm down the family member first, then have a talk with the woman leader and say that this is the call that I got and so on. It was very interesting what she shared with me, that in every single case, the woman leader took umbrage that somebody from the family could call the office and say that my daughter or daughter-in-law is coming late. So I can well imagine the fight that women leaders have to put through to succeed in this. And if we can eliminate some of these issues in a quiet way, without making it into a gender issue, without making it into a bias issue, But something that in a context we have to address. I think we will then create a truly what I would call a neutral basis for people to grow irrespective of gender.
Mr. Kamath, one has to ask you this as the MD and CEO of ICICI Bank, which you've served. What is it about women and finance that gets them into leadership positions? Or is it just that we've been used to seeing them and now they are everywhere? Is there something about women leadership in finance, particularly the finance minister now, the SEBI chairman, and many, many others across banks and financial institutions earlier also?
I would say that it is a funnel. From my experience, it is a funnel. A, B, your intent to remove bias in everything that you do, starting with your thought, and then every action that you do, and thereafter giving equal opportunity in every area that you do. And I think today what has happened is the pool is getting deeper and deeper. I heard, I think some of the panelists talk about, the pool is not yet deep enough. I agree. Because if you look at the number of women in STEM, that was also used. I think Anjali mentioned that in the 30s now, 30 to 40%, somewhere there. But it is not a very old pool. The pool has gotten, I think, richer and richer only in the last 5-6 years. So my guess here is that the women leaders are actually growing up the chain in the organizations. And the real time to look at and take stock is probably 4 to 5 years. One point here is people try to do what I call lateral movement. Lateral movement will happen and will succeed only again if there is a pool. But if there is no pool, then how do you get the lateral movement in? So I would think the pool has to increase, and that's happening at very rapid pace. Secondly, people are growing into their jobs much earlier. So they are rising faster. So I'm sure that pool is... But there is one other solution that we use successfully in ICICI, and that is basically to say, can we reskill or repurpose a person? Repurpose not in terms of the purpose of the organization, repurpose in the context of what is the skill set that you're doing. I think a great example is Kalpana, my colleague Kalpana. Kalpana is a lawyer. But somewhere within the first 3 or 4 years when she was growing up the ladder, I said, as a chief legal officer or whatever role you have limited scope. And there is somebody there who is going to be there 7-8 years. So I move you laterally to treasury. So initially she said, I have no skills at all. I said, you will learn those skills. And you see where she reached as a consequence of that decision she took. And thereafter we have tried to do that. So there are ways in which you could do this. But again, the organization needs to have a mindset which is completely neutral and blind to this challenge.
Mr. Kamath, one also hears stories about women entrepreneurs, and this is again a continuing concern about women entrepreneurs not getting enough funding, startups not getting enough support from VCs, PEs, and even banks. Do you think that is a concern which sort of worries you as well?
Might have been a concern a few years back, but I think at least from my perspective, where I'm more of a desk chair analyst these days. So when I look at it, if I heard Anjali talk, and I heard Dipali talk, and other ladies on the panel, I think that is changing and falling by the wayside very quickly. The PE world is much smarter than the banking world, and in that world, they will identify the leader again, irrespective of gender and any biases that are there. And indeed, in today's world, I think a woman can probably do several jobs better than a man. And I can say this, if you ask me, give examples, which I won't because we don't have time, give examples of what women have done and what men have done. In ICICI during my career, I think the lateral thought and innovative thinking that has come out of my women leaders is probably 2 to 1 as compared to men, or higher. But at least 2 to 1 in terms of anything that would have done in the organization.
Mr. Kamath, when one has got you, one can't let you go without some question on the economy at least, given what is happening around us. Now we have an oil shock staring us in the face. The economic survey, sort of reckoned the growth rate given $70 to $75 a barrel oil prices, and we know where we are right now, well over 100, 110. what are your chief concerns given the fact that there has been a huge expenditure push in the budget and you are at NABFID right now? What are the key concerns right now for the economy?
On the oil front, my view is that this should correct, because this is otherwise a global problem which I don't think the West wants either. I'll put it in context. Do you think the West can survive with inflation upwards of 5, 7, 6, 7, 8? We have heard Western, I would say, thought leaders say that if your inflation rises, then you better increase your interest rates. Have you seen anybody increase interest rates? Across Europe, it is still near zero. US, it's still below 2%. Inflation is well over 7%. So whereas economic theory, which was pushed down into us, the developing world, where has that gone? So what I'm trying to say is, I don't want them to correct themselves, but this cannot last long for them. So this one. But second and third, I would think that we have a long runway as it is. The Honorable PM mentioned that, the Honorable Finance Minister mentioned that. Basically, the 25-year horizon that they've given is absolutely spot on. If you look at what needs to be done. So you have propensity to grow. It is not as if you're struggling to find where you will grow. That's number one. The second is we have another big driver with us, and that is the digital economy. The digital economy, if I look at, say, our neighbors, it's now 35 to 40% of the overall GDP. And this momentum is there for the last 8-10 years. In our context, this is just starting. And again, we have leaders who are funding these sort of initiatives. And the rate at which this will grow is going to be phenomenal. I would believe that if not 25-30%, let's assume it grows to 15-20% in the next 3 to 5 years. That is, if you had, say, 8% aspirational growth, you add another 20-25% there, you're looking at 10%. So you are getting to double-digit growth because of this new driver that is happening. Yesterday, I've been looking at some interesting numbers. What I would look at it as a simple thing. If you are, if any one of you goes on YouTube and looks at YouTube content creators, I don't want to go into influencers, I don't want any of these things. YouTube content creators, not influencers. Content creator could be somebody sitting in a village cooking channel, somebody who is in a village and blogging his daily life, or this. And the number of views and what is happening to the advertising platform and wealth creation at one hand in their hands. But that also is not the story. To me, the story is every single content creator is probably now giving employment to a whole host of people. And yesterday I saw a number which was very interesting. YouTube number put out by YouTube yesterday, it needs verification I would say, that 7 lakh jobs have been created in the last 2 years just by the content creators on YouTube. This is, your lifestyle improves, so you then you then buy a second, you buy from a cycle you go into a motorcycle, from a motorcycle you go to a car, and so on and so forth. You buy a new home, you put air conditioners, you can actually see it happening. We used to say it in 97, 98, that's a transformation happening in India. The white collar revolution had done that. And we would say that aspiration is changing from 21-inch television to 28-inch television, and from a cycle to a motorcycle. You're now seeing it all over again, driven by several digital media. And I would think this has not yet been captured or factored into economic growth. So my view is that we run a tight ship. Luckily for us, the banking balance sheets are clear. The corporate balance sheets are clear. I think the government has figured out how to lend a helping hand without destabilizing the fiscal balance, as it were. And the Reserve Bank has also played structurally a very important role. If you have all these in alignment, I think our path should be to those 25 years ahead and sequence it. And the sequencing is very clear. We have got an infrastructure growth pipeline for those 25 years, and a digital growth pipeline also for 25 years. Manufacturing, I think, is quickly coming of age, and they will grow on their own because that is a well-set industry in India. So I think we're going to have very interesting times looking at.
And a lot of it, like you wrote also for our anniversary issue about the digital super cycle. That's the one which you're betting on for growth.
The digital super cycle is the one I mentioned, probably growth of 20 to 25% on top of what we have. So it is a pie, it's a cherry on this pie that is growth.
Iconic banker K.V. Kamath. Ladies and gentlemen, a major round of applause for Mr. Kamath for all that he has achieved. And thank you very much, Mr. Kamath, for speaking to us. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen. And Mr. Kamath, we do want to play out something the team put together for you.
He is a pillar of the Indian banking system. The troubleshooter India banks on. But Kundapur Vaman Kamath has also created a legion of women managers. The newly appointed chairperson of SEBI, Madhabi Puri Buch, is a protege of Kamath. Zarin Daruwala, the current CEO of the Standard Chartered Bank, rose in ranks as the wholesale banking head in ICICI under Kamath's tutelage. 7-time Business Today Most Powerful Woman Award winner Renuka Ramnath built ICICI's private equity arm under Kamath. Kamath also groomed Vishakha Mulye, who is the current ED, Wholesale Banking of ICICI Bank. Through all this, KV Kamath has succeeded in creating an environment of gender diversity at ICICI, ensuring new generations of women leaders.
Thank you once again, Mr. Kamath and Saurav. On to our next panel discussion this evening. Hybrid work cultures are now here to stay. Corporate India has realized that the digital world allows it to access talent across borders and also has a newfound understanding on what needs to be done in order to retain talent. Empathy and safety have become must-haves at organizations. We've seen companies prioritize their diversity and inclusion agenda in the last year, announcing more hiring of women employees across the board. While in boardrooms, we still have a long way to go to making an impact. The numbers, however, have at least steadily been increasing. So is India Inc.'s diversity on track? To discuss that, I'd like to welcome on stage our panelists. Ashima Goyal, member RBI MPC. I'll invite you up in just a moment. Just going to announce the names first. Vibha Paralkar, MD and CEO, HDFC Life. Suparna Mitra, CEO, Watches and Wearable Divisions, Titan. Parizad Sirwala, Partner and National Head, Global Mobility Services, Tax, KPMG India. In conversation with Ayush Elawadi, Tech Editor and Presenter, Business Today Television. And with that, I'd like to welcome all of you on stage. Ayush, over to you.
Thank you, Abba, for that introduction. And I was glued into your panel, and there was a lot of talk of diversity and inclusion. And so I'd like to represent a small part of this panel and try to understand from this esteemed panel of guests what the DNI, diversity and inclusion agenda is all about, and how diversity really works at the workplace. Ashima, I'd like to start off by asking you. Now, I was reading this piece, which happened to be in the Business Today magazine, and it started off talking about how you come from a family of doctors, and you went to med school, you joined med school, then left and pursued, well, a career in academia and economics. The reason was very interesting. The reason was that a mentor of yours told you that you were in the wrong profession at the wrong time in the wrong country. Has that changed now when we're talking about it in 2022?
No, it was pre-medical I switched from, and that was because I'd gone for voluntary work and I saw a lot of violence in hospitals, controlled violence. And I believe in sort of caring, strengthening, etc., etc., so it didn't suit me. But the mentor had said that about economics, because economics was very male centered at the time when I switched to economics. So today you have a lot of women there, a lot of diversity, but in the early years, when I was in Yale, students there in the Ivy Leagues were on strike because they didn't have any mentor. No female tenured economic faculty was there in the Ivy Leagues, imagine. But today I'm on some boards and so on, and what happens is that women are there on boards, but you're put as a chair of, say, CSR, and this idea of diversity, that as a woman you're going to be more caring and empathetic. So maybe I have been like that, but true diversity, I think, is for women to have freedom to be aggressive if they want to. And there's some research which suggests that the reason females are seen as more empathetic is that they play a larger role in bringing up children. And in a way, men are not liberated because they are in 8-to-8 jobs and they don't have the time to participate. So, and again, there's research which shows that women and men, there was much more equality in the very early years when there were hunter-gatherer societies. And with agrarian societies, outside home work became more, productive. And men had a larger share of resources. Women were tied at home. They lost bargaining power in the family and so on. So I see a big change now because of digital, because of the new sort of work from home and outsourcing and distance working. Some women think that it puts more pressure on you because you have to do housework and work. But actually it allows you to maintain your skills, because the biggest factor that holds women back even today is really looking after children, caring for family members. And so you can do that while maintaining your skills. You can make up for your inability to travel. So I think I'll stop there.
All right. I trust the academic, and you could also give us a little bit about the hunter-gatherers and the history to that as well. Vibha, I'd like to ask you the next question, which is about the representation in corporate boards. And I was reading this Harvard Business Review report, which spoke about how this movement started off sometime in 2003 in Norway. And then other European countries started mandating it as law. And I must confess to the audience, I'm a lawyer who joined the media and still very fascinated with what happened in India in 2013 with the amendment to the Companies Act mandating a woman director on the board. But the criticism to this particular premise is that in the West especially, a lot of that was merely symbolic. And it wasn't necessarily an effective tool for corporate governance. Is that a similar story here in India as well?
So I think, you have to start somewhere. Yes, a part of me did rebel when you have to mandate. But let me take the example. Anjali and I sit on Tata Power board. That board just required one. And now there are two in second term. So hopefully we're doing a decent job, and that's why we're there for the second term. And it starts becoming more than just a rubber stamp. If your female population of whatever industry that you represent is close to 50%, maybe say 45%, and you don't have representation, and not just in terms of gender, it could be various other kinds of diversity, then you're not really listening to that section effectively enough. That's number one. Number two, over a period of time, like I said, you start somewhere, but eventually you start seeing, I think one of the speakers on the earlier panel mentioned, that you leave your gender outside. I think all of us, successful or so-called successful women, don't see ourselves as women. It's how others perceive us. We see ourselves as someone who needs to get on with the job at hand. So I think it doesn't matter you start off somewhere as long as you move the needle meaningfully beyond a token.
Subarna, she mentioned diversity, of course, over there, and the diversity and inclusion agenda that is spoken of a lot with HR practices. But I'd imagine this has to be something which is, well, top to bottom, right? It has to be really ingrained in the ethos or DNA of the organization. Has it been a challenge for you in your role to really get that culture going? How much of this is a cultural challenge?
So, you know, in the earlier panel also this discussion was there of policies and processes being the hardware and the culture being the software. So, if you just take the definition of diversity, it is usually about the representation. So even what we were talking about earlier, the number of women, you can actually mandate and get to diversity by mandate. But if you don't have the culture of inclusion, then that diversity is not going to stick. So you've built the gym, but nobody is using it, nobody gets healthier. So it's really about culture, and in fact, I'd also like to bring up the topic or the word of equity. So diversity will bring you in more women in the organization, but if you don't have a culture of inclusion, they will probably leave, or they'll feel undervalued, or not get opportunities for progress. But even more important is equity, and equity is not the same as equality. Which means that, you know, Mr. Kamath was talking about a woman colleague or a woman leader who went home at 1 o'clock. And it may be true in Bombay. It may not be true in a lot of other places. So all things being equal, we do need to correct for the larger, you know, societal challenges. And therefore, the organization has to work on really supporting and sponsoring women to kind of counterbalance existing societal biases, conditioning, and responsibilities for women, which seem to come, you know, women do the heavy lifting in terms of child care, elder care, and running the household. So culture is important, but it's really, you know, you need to have both. You can't, there are companies where the culture is there, but you know, it's just generally an inclusive culture, a nurturing environment, and both men and women do well. But if you don't really work on diversity and you don't really work on equity, then while it is an overall nurturing environment, maybe the gender issue may not get solved.
You raised some very pertinent points, and I want to, you know, extrapolate some of them in a bit. But since you mentioned equity, Parizad, one specific dimension, one aspect of equity is, well, a very simple way of looking at it. Obviously, Suparna touched upon a much wider aspect of it, is, well, pay, right? And disparity in pay. In the sports and entertainment world, this is, well, a much publicized debate. A lot of people like to weigh in on this, that, well, there isn't parity in pay when it comes to men and women. In corporate India, what's your experience been like? I mean, at a consultancy firm especially, is this a genuine concern even when we come to, well, India Inc.?
Well, fortunately not. I've spent 25 plus years in a Big Four consultancy. Yes, there are times when I've asked for my seat at the table. But fortunately for me, pay parity has never been an issue, because I think most of the multinational accounting firms, they truly believe in meritocracy. Yes, there are, you know, we spoke about stereotypes, we spoke about biases at times, in terms of whether a woman is capable to lead a business, or is she rather more, you know, beneficial in a support role. There can be stereotypes like this, but I think it's also about our own mindset. Personally, I followed the 3 C's all my life, and I touch 50. Courage, compassion, and competence. And I think these 3 tenets, as long as any individual or professional has, in my sphere of profession, pay parity has never been an issue. In fact, a large part of our compensation is variable based. I run a very small business for the last several years of my life. I think it's the amount I put on the table. If I'm a net contributor, my variable pay is higher than my fixed. It allows me to lead a very comfortable life. So fortunately, I have not seen it in my sphere of industry. Largely also because most of the consulting firms are also global headquarter driven. So a lot of, you know, global policies around compensation also trickle down. But having said that, it's a level playing field as far as performance and pay is concerned.
Ashima, I wanted to ask you, when we talk about young people entering the workforce, a lot of us look at someone who's been there, done that, and really established themselves and say, this is my role model. For young men and women entering the workforce, and this is a much broader question, having a role model, is this something which is gender specific, or can this be gender agnostic?
I think it helps to have someone of the same gender who has achieved a lot, because a young girl entering will think that it's possible for her to do it also, because she sees greater similarities. So just to give a funny example, I'd got a fellowship to the US, and Barry Eichengreen, who's a very prolific US professor, was willing to host me. But Berkeley, that time, they were very crowded. So they said, you won't get an office, you'll have to work in the library. And someone else visiting from there said, no, then don't join them, because you won't meet anyone or talk to anyone, because there's, female Lou and male Lou. So there are sort of, ways in which you're more comfortable with women. And like whenever I've achieved something or been appointed somewhere, I get a lot of these congratulatory mails from my younger colleagues, and all of them say that, and a lot of people tell me that also, that they feel that a lot is possible for them. Yeah, but before that, so that is on this issue. I just wanted to touch a little bit on this ability or skills. That is the most important thing. It's not gender and diversity. You may be comfortable with another woman, but ultimately you're going to really achieve things if you know your subject and you are willing to put your knowledge out there wherever it's required. You're clear about that. That's the most important thing. And the other from research is that this pay issue. Society has to change, because a lot of families, couples, research shows that when the woman starts earning more than the man she holds back, or in school, or in college, when you become conscious of the other sex, you stop competing, say, in maths or subjects where there's a male ego involved. So men also have to change. And that is why I said that women don't have to be empathetic and sacrificing. That's regarded as being female. Perhaps they are that because they're more sensitive, they bring up families. But if women go out and work and men have the option to be there and bring up children, like there's a Raymond ad, The Complete Man. Men become, so you can specialize. Like someone said that women don't have a comparative advantage in changing diapers. So there are a lot of women who are doing that, who are inherently skilled, who could make huge contributions to society, but they don't have the opportunity to build their human capital. So if a couple were able to specialize according to their skills, if the woman is more capable in the outside world, she goes there, and the man stays more at home. I think society would gain, and that is the true way to get real gender equality.
All points being duly noted, ma'am. I'll make a point, mental note already. Parizad, I think you wanted to come in over there on the role models bit, because I saw the smile as soon as Ashima started speaking.
So I've only had men as role models when in the beginning part of my career. I've always had male bosses who taught me to deal less on compromise and conflicts and focus more on the job at hand. When you're young, you start your career, and in those initial days, there aren't many women professionals in a consultancy. That's changed obviously now. I had a male partner who was my boss, who always used to tell me, keep the passion, remove the emotion. He actually taught me to be emotionally resilient. Because when I don't get things my way, particularly in a client service industry, there are a lot of pressures, there are stiff targets. He used to keep repeating, Parizad, keep the passion, remove the emotion. That has stayed with me. But yes, at this stage of my career, I definitely have seen that women as role models sometimes act as magnets to draw the younger women professionals as well, who don't lack on anything, whether potential, performance, attitude, conduct, nothing. At times, there is a dearth of little bit of confidence. I do a lot of leadership panels where I see that attribute coming in even now. So I think, as was just mentioned, that sometimes if you have a woman in a particular position, I've seen a lot of young girls walk up to me asking me to share my story. So role modeling works for the betterment of, getting more and more women leaders to a particular leadership level. I just wanted to share a small snippet. I'm at that stage of my life where KPMG has a mentoring program formally. It's called Empower. And I had a very young male partner who chose me as the mentor. And one of my first questions was, what made you? And of course, our profiles and CVs were attached. And he told me the similar thing that, I've worked a lot with male bosses, but I specifically sought out a female professional as my mentor, just to see, the different perspective, the ability to have empathy in some of the decisions or feedback that he had received in his career. And I thought, I've arrived in life and I had this kind of a person looking out and seeking out for me. But yes, I think more from a confidence building to, for some of the younger professionals to emulate. And as someone said, the sky is the limit. It would be good if women serve as role models and act as a magnet for attracting other younger professionals as well.
Vibha, you'd like to chime in?
Yeah, I do. And that is, my mother who's 80, she's here in the audience, and she is a 64 batch IAS officer. So when I look back in terms of what she's done, and in some places, she's Tamil Nadu cadre, that there was no washroom for women officers. So to fit her, they had to build a washroom to begin with. So since that, I feel I've had a pretty easy journey. And I think that at that point in time, in terms of there were no females around to give her guidance. And I remember her telling me a story wherein two small kids, my brother and I, and my father was also here, was sailing at that time, Merchant Navy. And she said, I'm going to throw in the towel. It was actually her boss, then boss, who counseled her to say, go on leave, your job is safe, come back if you change your mind. And then she served full term. So the point is, whether male or female, we all need mentors. And I think we all have to give back to Parizad's point. So I do, I'm part of a mentorship group, part of Bloomberg's, wherein you're giving back by helping other mid-manager level ladies in buy-side investment on how to just bridge that next level. So that every bit counts, and I think it's gender agnostic.
Suparna?
Yeah. So I do agree with, what that mentorship is usually gender agnostic, but I think I'll just narrate a very small anecdote. I had once, about 7-8 years back, gone and spoken on International Women's Day at a company. And there were, after whatever I spoke, there were questions, and there was a young woman who said that, ma'am, you've been in sales and marketing, and you've traveled a lot, and I have a question: how hard is it to do a traveling kind of sales job when you have young children? And I can't remember the answer I gave. I don't even remember the question was asked. 3 years later, I went back to the same company, and this young woman wanted to specifically meet me, and she said that apparently I told her, yes, you can. And then they were planning a child, she and her husband, and she showed me the picture of her 10-month-old son and said that if I had not heard you that day, I would have quit my job. And when I heard you, I said, if she can do it, so can I. And this works only it will work only for women getting inspired by women. Yes, at an overall, in an idealistic world, women will be also inspired by men. I've had outstanding male mentors who have guided, inspired, motivated me. But I could never ask this question, how did you manage, a traveling kind of sales job with young children? That's a question that a person who has lived that reality, you have to experience it to be able to give a valid and credible approach.
You know, Ashima, you mentioned the whole piece on stay-at-home dads, and maybe the gents really, well, splitting the responsibility, so to speak. My mum was a doctor, my dad was a broadcaster. They split it literally 7 to 2 shifts to deal with two naughty boys. But now you look at pop culture and you look at how things have changed. It's very acceptable, be it on OTTs in the West or even, well, Bollywood films. And even now when you see some of my friends and colleagues, well, there are concepts like paternity leave. There are top tech companies doing that as well. Stay-at-home dads is here to stay, and that would keep you, well, happy with your argument?
Yes, I think there is progress, and the younger generations now, there's much more equality because of this. And I'm sure your dad is a very sensitive person. Yeah. So it helps in that way. And I would like to say about mentors that I get mails or even male students come and tell me that my work inspires them. But for female students, they say things like that, that you were able to do all this, so therefore we think we can do it also. I think that is why having a female mentor is important. Also just to show, because we saw in the early statistics that despite all the changes, the number of women who are on top and in leadership roles is very, very low. And so there, I think this diversity factor, that as a society we are losing out major skills, major contributions, major different ways of thinking when we don't allow, and that funnel that Mr. Kamath was talking about is important also because you have to have those skills. So you have to have a large number of people entering at lower levels and then reaching the top, continuing through to the top.
But then how do we fix that, Ashima? Because then organizations will have to look at it in a way where some of the things that you guys mentioned on reskilling, and after an employee comes back from leave after a big life event, these are things organizations and HR policies will have to fix. Or has that already begun?
Yeah, I was mentioning the role of technology, right? I mean, Cheryl was saying that women had to give up more caring and so on. That's true, but at the same time, I think it has shown us the power of work from home. In so many corporations now, so they become more open to flexi time. And if you are a working mom and you can be at home, I had a paper which won an award at GDN, which is about a household labor allocation function, how a woman has to put in an input every 4 hours. So because of this, she can't go out and travel or can't do certain kinds of jobs, and her productivity goes down. So therefore, the man has more resources and more power, etc., etc. But with ICT, what you can do is you can keep up your skills in many kinds of jobs. So you can maintain that capital formation and your resources and your ability in your particular field. So I think corporates have to use technology, have to have flexi working, have to have open leave, etc. Some mix of, and this should be for males also. If a man is empathetic or caring and wants to be at home and care for children, he should be given that opportunity also.
Sirs in the audience, work from home for all of us. That's what Ashima is saying. But that said, Parizad, this whole conversation about D&I, diversity and inclusion, I think previous panels alluded to it as well. Do you think it's high time, especially with Gen Z, I feel old now, Gen Z coming into the workforce, and them being largely iconoclastic, breaking old societal norms, be it how they can unabashedly do things on social media, they're very confident when it comes to public speaking as well. With this new workforce coming in, do you think it's high time that we reassess this diversity and inclusion definition, widen the scope to include things like generational diversity or sexual orientation, include these things literally in the spirit of inclusion as well?
So before I go into KPMG policies, I have a 19-year-old cool dude, and my worry is he's going to be a stay-at-home son as long as mama works. That's my biggest worry these days, okay? I did ask him once, as you talk of Gen Z, I don't know what came over me. I asked him once that, what is it, would you have any issues in, reporting to a women boss? He shrugged his shoulders, looked at me, thought I was insane. And he has a problem of plenty. All the friends are girls right now, and they're sort of in my home all the time. But coming to the specific point of, I think let me talk about, at least we as a firm have our entire diversity and inclusion policies around largely 6 pillars. And you mentioned it, it's not just gender, it's multicultural, multi-generational, LGBTQ, as well as disability. And within that, a lot of reverse mentoring also is taken up as a program where you have young millennial employees who also sit on advisory councils, which includes mentoring, giving their strategic points of view, new age thinking, whether in the boardroom or in the leadership team of the firm. Consciously, and I think, the pandemic has accelerated, and remote working is the best. It's like oxygen for women careers and men careers at this moment. So the lines are really blurred. Coming to specific, I'd like to touch upon certain specific programs that we've run as a firm, which I thought have got great traction even when we populated it on social media. We started Continuum, which I thought was a very good program for returning mothers. Not that we were doing it over a period of time consciously, but we specifically sought out returning mothers who could transition back into the roles that they perhaps played earlier in their life. And we saw great amount of traction there. We have a KPMG network of women. 50% of the members on the I&D Council are our male colleagues who work in day night, day out, as their day jobs, to give the platform to women professionals just to network, know each other as peers and talk about their opportunities and challenges. A lot of live speaking sessions like Talk to Win, whether it's male professionals or women, male and women leaders, just come and talk about the different skills, not just technology and AI, digitalization, conflict resolution, client service, things like negotiation and networking. All this was curated after we listened by way of surveys to the voice of people as well. So I think you're right. I mean, it's not any more gender. KPMG also did a director pulse survey 2021. I'll just briefly touch upon some of the findings. It was interesting to note, and we've discussed that most of the director representations is on account of regulatory pressures, stakeholder activism, and now the ESG principles. But largely investors are looking across corporates in terms of diversity, not just on gender, but even in skills and experience. I personally serve on the board of the firm for the last 2 years. I chair the People and Culture Committee. And one of the skill sets that we are continuously seeking is technology, cybersecurity, skills as well, irrespective of the gender, just so that it can be blended in the strategy of the firm going forward.
Suparna, at Titan, and now I know what you all are doing with wearables, and this is a big push into the future as well, right? This is a legacy company which is now doing some really cool stuff. How have you guys really adapted to some of the things that they've been talking about, like flexi, work hours, work from anywhere, work from home, stuff that millennials and Gen Z are really interested in? And how have people in the workforce responded to that? And have you had any sort of positive feedback when it comes to some of the things we're talking about?
So we have a very diverse workforce. There are the young millennials, and there is a large pool of people for whom work from home is a possibility. There is another very large pool of people, people who work in factories and people who work in brick and mortar stores. There is nothing like work from home. If you're working in a factory, you jolly well be in the factory. So I think for a company like Titan, it's actually managing 2 parallel tracks of workforce. There is a large percentage of people who are really the solid citizens, the soldiers who are, marching, who have, digital and all of that can't solve the work that they do. And for them, I think the idea is how do we make it better and better working conditions, more flexibility, etc. And then there is the other big pool of people who are working, which is more of a knowledge kind of work, where, of course, I think the last 2 years has shown that, you can actually work very effectively and very productively from anywhere. But one of the things that I do want to point out is that now that almost everybody is back, we do see that while productivity and efficiency was not negatively impacted, in fact positively in many cases during work from home, because we are a lifestyle company, we create things that people desire, and creative and innovative processes require collaboration and collective work, and that is actually better done in person. But I think what has happened is we've realized that you can do a very good job of hybrid and balance the needs of the organization as well as the needs of the individual.
Thank you so much, Ashima, Vibha, Suparna and Parisa. It's been a fascinating conversation. I've taken down notes and I've learned a lot through the course of this conversation. Thank you for being a lovely audience. Over to you, Abha.
Thank you, Ayush, and thank you, distinguished guests. Before I invite our next guest on stage, we'd like to play an introduction to his remarkable journey in India Inc.
One of the first and the most influential private bankers in India, Uday Kotak has built the Kotak Mahindra Bank from a small NBFC to a financial supermarket. Nykaa's founder and CEO, Falguni Nair, worked under Uday Kotak as the investment banking head for nearly 2 decades. 7-time winner of the Business Today Most Powerful Woman Award, Shanti Ekambaram, President, Consumer Banking, is another professional groomed by Kotak. As the head of SEBI's panel on corporate governance, Kotak was instrumental in getting women a foothold in corporate boardrooms. The move has gone a long way in improving the gender diversity ratio on Indian company boards.
Mr. Kotak, it's a pleasure to have you with us. I'd like to invite you on stage for a fireside chat on women in leadership, the representation of women in corporate boardrooms, and how women leaders are being mentored at the Kotak Group under your leadership. In conversation with Siddharth Zarabi, Managing Editor, Business Today Television.
Good evening. Good evening. Namaskar. Warm welcome to Uday Kotak. Always a pleasure to have you on the stage and on this very important topic. And before I do that, warm welcome Mr. Thackeray for being here with us. And we'll get to hear him with my colleague Rahul Kamal shortly. But once again, I want to begin, Mr. Kotak, on the subject, and as you know, most powerful women. And I think every woman in India is a powerhouse by herself. These awards signify and represent some of them. But for a population of the size of India, obviously, the numbers are going to be far higher. For my audience, just a few numbers in terms of the people that we have. Almost 45% of all startups in India, and we know that we are currently in some ways the unicorn capital of the world, at least the developing world, the emerging markets, are either founded or largely peopled and driven by women entrepreneurs and managers. So that's a number of around 45% of 50,000 startups. A round of applause if the audience can give, and we hope that this number keeps going up. Mr. Kotak, I'm going to begin and try and keep it as rapid and quick as is possible. How many women work for the bank that you founded and have led so successfully into a marquee name?
We have got a total workforce which is now
more than 80,000 people in totality. And our current ratio is 26%. And we aspire to take it to a third in the next 3 years.
Wow, a round of applause for that. And how does that compare with peers in the banking space?
I think a lot of them are in the early 20s. Some of them are in the late teens. But I think we are pretty much at a reasonable ratio, but there is clearly room to improve. And again, there, Siddharth, it's about stereotypes. The belief is that there are certain kinds of jobs in a bank which a woman can't do.
This was the PSU bank stereotype.
PSU banks and even in private sector banks. And let me give you one example.
Keep the mic closer.
Let me give you one example. The example of collections. So one of the very important aspects which a bank has to do is to collect the money it has lent. So the stereotype is, oh, for a collections job, it has to be a male. So we have actually now found that women not only are effective in the job, in fact, they are better. And we have also tried it in rural and semi-urban India, and it is turning out to be very effective. For doing a job which was a male stereotype job of collections.
So collection is not about muscle, it's all about mind and presence.
Absolutely.
Okay, what about borrowing? Because I remember talking to bankers and also on the field, especially in the small finance sector, and a lot of them say women make good borrowers. They return the money on time. Is that correct?
I think there are a number of other areas where women actually score better. One is commitment to repay a loan.
Okay.
And that is clearly superior. Second is stickiness in the job. The attrition ratio of women is much lower than men, at least at Kotak.
Okay.
And it's something which we find quite fascinating. And as long as we can find innovative ways of women growing, for example, flexibility on work hours. And one of the things which COVID has dramatically made it possible is flexibility on work hours. And if we expand that scope and make it even flexi times, at 2 or 3 times a week to come to work and balance work from home, I think it's going to dramatically increase the participation of women in the workforce.
Since you talk about these things, I also have to ask you, not just for your bank, but for the industry and your general view, are women compensated equally with men in India?
Why do you ask that question? I don't think it's a question you need to ask, because at least that's what I feel, that most progressive organizations don't really distinguish between a man and a woman when it comes to pay.
But would all organizations be called progressive in India?
You know, it's a matter of opinion, and I suppose some of them can get better. But in general, I don't think there is any differentiation between a man and a woman when it comes to compensation, and it's broadly based on performance in most organizations.
How would you compare us globally? I don't like those comparisons, but I still have to ask you this.
I think we are getting better,
okay,
but there is long way. And I think what is happening is, as we go down the curve in terms of the size of companies, at smaller companies, I think there could still be areas of differentiation on gender. But as you get larger, and most organizations are getting to be actually finding it far more efficient and effective to have a larger woman workforce.
You're a billionaire banker, and I'm looking at my phone so that I try and get this pronunciation right. This is a line that I heard when I did several events on the ground with Smriti Irani, and that was a series called Women Mean Business in the hinterland of India. And one of the lines that someone in the audience said, a homemaker from a rich business family, she said that my husband told me in response to a question, Stri Asu Manne Marwa Mango Che. The context, maybe I didn't get the pronunciation right, and please excuse my Gujarati for that. The context was that this woman stood up and said, I belong to a business family, and you know, we are an old business family, yet when I asked my husband about whether he has done a will and whether he has decided to do what with his property after he passes away, my husband got very upset and said, woman, do you want me to die? Does that represent an attitude in business families? What would you say to that?
I think changed, and are changing. I would say today's times, I think it's getting to be much more progressive. I would say most families who have children, I think they treat them equally. And I think it's a fast-changing landscape. There is again a stereotype mindset about how we have thought about in the past, but the barriers are getting broken.
Mr. Kotak, would I be right in saying anecdotally, I don't have data for this, that women are less insured than men despite contributing equally and more?
I don't have data, but all that I can say is that in general, women live longer.
Okay.
And therefore are a better insurance bet. And I see Vibha here, that probably she will agree with that, that they are safer risk from an insurance point of view.
So if they are safer risk, should they get a lower rate of interest?
I think so. I think so. And
but sir, you are a billionaire banker. You run one of the most digital-friendly great banks. I'm asking you this as the CEO of the bank.
As the CEO of the bank, I can tell you that we are delighted to have a digital account, and we don't check gender when somebody opens an account.
Okay, what about low interest rates?
If at all, it's
give
the
a
reverse.
small discount, sir.
You know, my point is that let's not have a situation where women need to get favors. Let them feel that they are on merits and they are equal to men in every respect and no special treatment. Having said that, I do believe that we need to do our bit to ensure that merit is ensuring involvement of women in the process.
Sir, you have groomed so many women and men leaders in your career. Is there a bias against women in the finance sector, in the high stakes world of finance? And do they suffer from financial literacy due to our education system?
Historically, yes, but going forward, no. And I'm actually quite hopeful and bullish, and especially in a country where we've just seen some of the major elections get over, and India today, I have to commend India today for getting it right, much more right than others. And I'm told one of the decisive factors in the election was the woman voter.
Yes, absolutely. I'll come back to those on-ground events, and men who were in the audience, one of them stood up, and again, this was Gujarati, so I'm translating it. He said, it doesn't work for me to mingle my business and my money with my wife. I'm devoted to her. Everything that I've got is because of her, Lakshmi, but I don't want it to get mixed up with her. It causes me too much stress.
You know, I again share something from my life. Whenever I have to take any major decision, it's the instinct of my wife which finally helps me make the call.
So is that the secret financial source for your great success?
There is no question, and I will share a story here. A long time ago, we were joint venture partners with Goldman Sachs, and we were at a critical moment when we had to decide either buy back our stake or sell our stake at a fancy valuation to Goldman Sachs. And I was struggling. I was awake in the middle of the night, doing my mathematics, which is a better deal, and struggling with it. And my wife, she saw the light, and she was getting disturbed. So she woke up and said, "What is this light for?" So I said, "I'm struggling with this." So she switched off the light and said, "Go ahead and buy your stake back."
Wow.
And that's what I did.
Okay, and history was made. Since we're talking about women, I want to ask you, do you see a woman succeeding you at the bank?
It's, you know, again, in today's times, it's always dangerous to say either ways. It is going to be a process, and the best person gets it.
The best person. We'll hope that truly the best person gets it. My last question, and I know I'm running out of time, but I'll just take a minute with this because I can't let you go without that. The last 5-6 years, as far as India's corporate culture is concerned, have seen one defining moment, and that is the bankruptcy and insolvency law. Storied names being sort of thrown into the Arabian Sea practically. Has the culture of doing business in India changed on account of that law?
There is no question. Many promoters who thought that they could get away without repaying their debts have realized that they will be out of business and ability to do business if they don't repay their debts. And it has significantly improved the culture of people wanting to pay back. And on that note, since we are talking about women, I've rarely seen a major IPC case with a woman going to bankruptcy.
Okay, that's a great word, and a round of applause. And one final word to all those aspiring young women in engineering colleges, in management schools, and we get to meet them and talk to them a lot, who want to be entrepreneurs. Uday Kotak, what would you tell to them, those who are here and those who are watching and hearing this program?
You know, my advice is go for it. And I have the story of a lady who has made great success, which is Falguni. And I still remember in 2011, after being the CEO of our investment bank, she came to me and said, Uday, I want to leave and start something on my own. So I said, what do you want to start? She said, I'm not going to compete with you, but I've thought about an idea which is in the area of beauty and the internet. I gave her a strange look, asked her whether she really knew what she was doing, and she's got a very successful career here. But she said, no, I want to do a startup, and I've thought about the name of the company, which in Sanskrit means a beauty queen, which is Nykaa.
That's the Nykaa story. Uday
Okay.
Kotak, it's always a pleasure talking to you. We are unfortunately out of time, but perhaps once again next year or maybe the year
Thank
after.
you.
A round of applause for Uday Kotak, ladies and
Thank you
gentlemen.
very much.
Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much.
We have a very special guest with us here tonight, the Honourable Minister Aditya Thackeray, Cabinet Minister of Tourism and Environment for the Government of Maharashtra. He has been a vocal proponent of equal rights and opportunities and has been looking at paving the way for generations to come. We've seen him actively involved in inculcating this in the governance of Maharashtra. There's a lot to speak about, and I'm going to invite the Honourable Minister along with my colleague Rahul Kamal, Executive Director Business Today and News Director, the TV Today Network, to take that conversation forward.
I hope you're all having a good evening. Aditya Thackeray, it's great to have you with us here at the Business Today Most Powerful Women Awards. We're talking at a time when the results that came from Uttar Pradesh in particular show that women voters determined which party won and the magnitude of victory. So far from the era where...
That's why I made it a point to come here.
Huh?
That's why I made it a point to come here.
Far from a time when it was imagined that the women in the family will vote wherever the male folk want them to. Women are showing agency when it comes to the polling booth and voting for whoever they think can take care of their interests the best, whether it is in terms of government schemes or welfare or law and order. This is a defining moment in Indian politics. How do you see this aspect, A, on a national basis, and the impact it could have on the politics of your state?
Firstly, it's a pleasure being here. Thank you for having me over here. Also, a pleasure interacting with you on screen and not with the regular sparks that we have in our conclaves, the India Today conclaves, which always is fun to be. I've been a part of it since 2013, I think since I was 23 years old, and it's almost 8 or 9 years that I've been a part of this. So thank you for coming to Mumbai and hosting this here as we start off again in a sort of pre-COVID era. We don't know whether it's post-COVID era. We don't know whether it's post-COVID as yet, but yeah. In terms of women voters, of course, it is a huge leap for us in terms of voters because, you know, we've always seen voters in the sense of whether women will step out to vote. That is the first question. 2, whether they will listen to the family and the head person in the family. Is it still a very patriarchal family and things like that? 2, you know, sort of what all the psephologists and all the experts make it to be in terms of the women defining where the governments go and how and who comes into the seat of power. So I think that is a huge leap of faith for our country. It is a defining moment for a democracy. I think that is very, very crucial. And for us as governments, obviously it is something for us to look back into in terms of if we are getting our policies for families right. Because largely if you see what women voters go for are policies for families. And as governments, we've always thought of infrastructure in terms of the big ticket projects, in terms of the concrete infrastructure, be it the bridges, the flyovers, the bullet trains, the metros. But we've also got to think of now, as we move ahead as a democracy in our 75th year of independence, of how we build our social infrastructure, because I think that is very, very crucial for women, the social infrastructure bit for the society at large.
We saw this first in Bihar and then in Uttar Pradesh, where women just seemed to think that the BJP was the party which was possibly best placed to take care of their interests in terms of welfare schemes and in terms of law and order, which is what held back Tejasvi Yadav and the RJD Congress combine in Bihar, and then the SP RLD combine in Uttar Pradesh. Is that something which concerns you, and what is it that you're doing in Maharashtra to ensure that what happened in Bihar and Uttar Pradesh with women voters doesn't happen in the next elections here?
Look, I wouldn't definitively say, because it's still a matter of study whether women prefer one party or another, because obviously political equations also matter a lot. There are a lot of other factors that come in. So I wouldn't say that the women choose a particular party over the other. But surely they have started to get down in huge numbers for voting, and I think that is a big change. In terms of politics, of course, 2004 to 14 was one era, 14 to I don't know how long this will be another era, so that keeps changing. So I'm not going to go into the depths of that.
What are you doing in the Shiv Sena to encourage women from the grassroots to A, become party members, and B, rise through the ranks to become significant stakeholders in your party's policy making and decision making?
I don't know how many are aware, but the Shiv Sena always has had a very, very strong women front, what we call as the Mahila Aghadi. Right from the 60s when the party got initiated to now, it's probably one of the largest women organizations where women at the forefront of political movements, be it political empowerment of people across the board or political empowerment of women. If you look at, that is one part of it. But if you look at two aspects which go beyond just having the women's front or the organization, if you look at the tickets, in terms of the political tickets that are given out for candidatures. Now, Sena is one party that has never really gone into religion, caste, creed, in terms of handing out tickets to people. We don't have quotas in our party saying, okay, if you're this caste, you will get so much. If you're this, we don't do that. Whoever works gets the ticket. And in that sense, of course, if you look at the share of women in Mumbai and of course across Maharashtra, especially for the municipal elections, because you have a lot more women stepping ahead for your local body polls than for Vidhan Sabha or Lok Sabha, be it the size of the constituency that matters or the people you have to serve or cater to that matters. But in terms of the BMC, the past 25 years, if you see the history and the record of the party, BMC has a thing where 50% of the tickets you have to give it to women, and that is for all parties across the board. The Sena is one party that's actually gone beyond it, not because of a quota or not because of the reservation, but just by natural standards, where we've given tickets to almost 67% that are women. The first, again, reservation for the mayor's post from 2017 to 2020 was for a woman, but from 2020 to right now, of course, was open category, could have gone to any person. And again, we made Mrs. Kishori Pednekar, who is a woman, just by the standards of her work and her service to the city. So that is one. And of course, again, if you see largely across Mumbai, be it all the banks, be it the hotels, all the industries, wherever we have our unions, and right from all the five-star hotels to the banks to the schools, largely there's a huge amount of women who've got trained in the Shiv Sena, coaching camps for, be it English speaking, for, banking jobs, for railways jobs, and have got through as, bread earners for the family. So that's something we're really proud of.
But we saw, for example, in Uttar Pradesh, your alliance partner, the Congress came up with the Ladki Hoon Lad Sakti Hoon campaign.
Not the Uttar Pradesh alliance. We did not have an alliance there.
I know, but I'm saying your alliance partner, Congress, NCP, Shiv Sena. So in Uttar Pradesh, the Congress came up with the Ladki Hoon Lad Sakti Hoon campaign. It backfired spectacularly. 97% of the candidates lost their deposit. Now, given those circumstances, how do you square the desire for women's reservation with electability? And how do you create a conducive ecosystem to ensure that you not just give tickets to women notionally, but also ensure that they are strong enough on the ground to be able to win?
Look, again, I'm not going to go into the political analysis of it. That's your analysis. Mine could be a little different. And of course, in terms of whether the campaign backfired or whether the candidatures backfired, whether it was individuals who backfired, it's a different thing altogether. But I think largely, as far as our party concerns, or across Maharashtra, you see a lot of women coming ahead, and you see a lot of women getting party tickets or candidatures based on their track record. Yes, there is a certain trend where, there's a slight discomfort where the size of the constituency increases, especially the Lok Sabha, because you've got huge sizes. Where you have local body polls, be it Mumbai, Pune, Thane, Navi Mumbai, Nagpur, you've got a lot of women in the fray, and that is a beautiful thing. Even today I had 4 or 5 events, and trust me, you'll see the pictures, there are more women attending it than men, and that is what made everyone happy. And of course, when I said this, all the people on the stage were like, Acha, what are you speaking? But I'm like, yeah, this is something we need to encourage, because when women start speaking, it is an entire family speaking.
That's interesting. So there is no pot shot which came your way saying that, okay, I'm going to leave that for the time being. But basically,
let's keep it for the India Today conclave.
Yeah, okay, fine. So now tell us, what are you doing in your individual capacity to try and groom more women leaders and try and bring them to the center stage and give them more opportunity?
So, I have, as a minister, I am the guardian minister of this district, which is Mumbai Suburban District, and I have 3 portfolios. One is protocol, the other is tourism, the third is environment and climate change. And again, I have 2 MOS as Ministers of State, one for tourism, one for environment. And then going beyond that, I have the MTDC to look into. And if I just give you the stats of how many women I work with on a day-to-day basis, the collector of my district is a very strong woman. And I'm really proud of the way she works, and she's been doing some great stuff here. For the last 2 years, I've been personally working in the city of Mumbai with a mayor who is a woman. All the 3 departments, where I had a choice of picking up a principal secretary to work for my department very diligently and taking it on a global stage, all 3 of them, one has 2 portfolios and one has 1, both of them are women. And my Minister of State is a woman, and the person who's the MD of MTDC is a woman. So it's largely a woman-centric office, but I can very proudly claim, and I'm not, patronizing this or being, endorsing or something like that, but it's probably one of the most efficient workspaces I've seen, because they actually get things done, and I'm very proud to be working with them. I'm learning a lot from them.
And finally, I remember when we came and did a job, we met with you before the Maharashtra elections, you were very passionate about urban infrastructure in Mumbai. And when we came here yesterday, spoke to people around, one of the complaints was that infrastructure projects aren't proceeding with the kind of speed and purpose that people would like. Is that just one of the flip sides of being in a coalition government, or do you think it's easier to explain in a campaign? No, sure. Yeah. But I'm saying in the speed which people would expect. Of course, you're doing whatever you can. So what is it that you're doing in the remaining part of your tenure to try and speed up infrastructure?
So, Rahul, you've spoken to your friends on the wrong side of the government. I'll take you around for a tour of Mumbai anytime soon. There are a couple of aspects to this. One is, of course, when we speak about speed, yes, development projects or sustainable development projects need to have speed. But when we speak about speed, the people there, the locals, the people for whom you're making all of these projects have to be heard, and heard enough, so that all the issues in their minds, the doubts, the frustrations are weeded out. You have to have a dialogue with them. That is one. 2, sustainability is a huge angle, and I think we cannot just bulldoze things and claim to do things without looking at the sustainability aspect of it or the environment aspect of it. 3, there has to be enough planning so that 2 ends of the project meet at logical ends. If you look at some of the big ticket projects that are going on, the coastal road, the southbound coastal road is more than 55% done, and we'll be completing it by December 2023. The Worli-Shivdi project, which is a major crucial connector for east-west connectivity in South Mumbai, has just begun October last year. We're doing good progress on that. The MTHL, which has been pending for a long, long time, almost for 20 years in discussions, debate, the Chief Minister laid the first girder, launched the first girder on, I think, 10th of Jan 2020. We have completed 64% of that project, slated for its completion October 2023. Today, before coming here, I started off with the Goregaon-Mulund Link Road. So these are the big ticket projects, and these are some of the projects that we're really proud of. We've been, taking reviews every month and pushing them ahead. But apart from that, what is very, very crucial for me personally is not just the big ticket, because all of these governments across the world focus on big ticket projects. I'm trying to look at ease of living. And if you look at ease of living, we need to look at the missing links of the roads, the DP roads, pedestrianization, pedestrian crossing or pedestrian refuge areas, better traffic management, aesthetic and design sense, safer schools, safer hospitals, smaller projects, smaller interventions that make your city better to walk, safer to live, and easier to, do things about. So I think that is what my focus is largely for all age groups and for all genders.
The reality of Indian politics is such that most of our politicians come from rural areas. And in Aditya Thackeray, we have a rare exception of somebody born and brought up in Mumbai who cares for the urban centers. Also because you live here, your friends live here, and therefore it is important for you to ensure that the city is much better than, you know, somebody who comes from a rural area. No disrespect, but their priorities are naturally slightly different. So it's good that you have some of these thoughts that you say that you're working on. We look forward to end results, and hopefully some of that will start showing on the projects that you just mentioned.
Our tour of Mumbai is due. We had done that long back. I think before elections, we had done the push-ups at Reclamation.
I look forward to that.
50 push-ups are due again. Sometime soon. Not
I
now.
see he's been working out, so therefore he's saying, yeah, 50 push-ups. Good. I'm glad that you're happy to take that on, and very happily set up another Jab We Met and we can drive around the city.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for joining us at the Business Today Most Powerful Women.
Thank you.
Aditya
Delighted to be
Thackeray,
here.
can we have a round of applause, please? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister, as well as Rahul, for that inspiring conversation. We just need a few moments, just 3-4 moments. We're just going to set the stage up for the award presentation. It's about to begin. We'll just take a couple of minutes to do that. So if you could just be patient with us.
Complicated concept like cryptocurrencies explained simply.
Let's get started. How to research before investing.
How blockchain works.
Hopefully going to answer all your questions for you.
Investments in crypto assets are subject to volatility, market, and other risks. Please research carefully before investing. Terms and conditions of the exchange apply.
He's been seeing this flagship issue and event evolve and grow since inception. Mr. Arun Puri.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you're enjoying yourselves. Ladies, wonderful ladies, and gentlemen, welcome to our edition of MPW. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. K.V. Kamath, Mr. Uday Kotak, and Mr. Aditya Thackeray for joining us this evening. This is the 18th edition of the Business Today Most Powerful Women Awards. In one of my early years, I remember saying that the MPW is one of my favorite events because it is so high on emotion and warm camaraderie. And I see that it hasn't changed at all. The energy and the enthusiasm
have only multiplied. We now have an embarrassment of riches. There are so many worthy women leaders to choose from. I welcome today the new entrants to this illustrious group. I'm also delighted that after 2 grueling years of the pandemic, we are able to meet in person for this celebration. Having attended most of the Business Today MPW Awards, I can safely say that I have literally seen the evolution of India's women leadership before my eyes. In the early 2000s, women were not as spread out across multiple industries, even male-dominated ones such as core manufacturing, as they are today. So our listing was initially dominated by bankers and promoters, with a sprinkling of executives from the media and entertainment industry, and sundry other sectors making up the rest. In the inaugural edition in 2003, there were 8 bankers in the list of 25 winners. 6 of them were from ICICI Bank. Over the next several years, the strong core group of women leaders at ICICI Bank was a regular feature in our listing of the most powerful women in business. Mr. Kamath, who you heard earlier, was singularly responsible for bringing women leadership roles at the ICICI Bank he headed. As women leaders spread their wings in other industries, Business Today MPW listing began to reflect these systemic changes which happened. The IT industry began to make its presence felt. Startup founders started getting in, and their investors too. This year's listings has a mix of great women leaders across multiple industries and regulatory bodies. Today, no industry dominates the list because the women are succeeding everywhere. That can only be good for the country and its economy. I'm also delighted that we are meeting in the 30th anniversary of the Business Today. And we will, of course, have that celebration just after the awards function. We started Business Today MPW Awards in 2003, but we started Business Today in 1992. It was a product of economic liberalization, existing in parallel and moving in tandem with the country's economic and business growth. When we published Business Today's first issue in January 1992, the country was full of hope and renewed energy. A minority government was changing the economic history of the country irreversibly. India had finally joined the world economy after decades of staying away. It opened up huge possibilities. And Indian entrepreneurs and businessmen lived up to the promise. In 1991, India's GDP size was $266 billion. In 2003, the year of Business Today's first MPW Awards, GDP grew to $450 billion. Today, it is estimated at $2.5 trillion. So wrap your head around that. The market cap to GDP in 2002-03 was about 61%. Today, it is 116%, signaling the value that has been created. These figures indicate how dramatically the Indian economy has been transformed. In the last 30 years, the significant changes I have observed. Many family-dominated business groups have vanished from the list of top firms in this country. The emergence of the IT entrepreneurs, several of whom became billionaires. Thirdly, the rise of entrepreneurs in multiple sectors, in infrastructure, pharma, real estate, aviation, and finance. A prime example of the latter is here with us today, Mr. Uday Kotak. Kotak Mahindra Bank is a shining example of entrepreneurial excellence, growing from an NBFC to become one of India's finest technology-driven banking institutions with a market value of nearly 3.5 lakh crores. Amazing, Uday. The other big change was the easy availability of money to fuel growth. Some unfortunately got diverted to fuel lavish lifestyles, but that's par for the course for a growing economy. Lastly, the digitization of India that kick-started the boom in startups, which led to the phenomenal growth in unicorns, which you've heard about today. Today, India is the third largest startup ecosystem in the world, next only to the US and China. And while many startups today are led by women, I hope to see the number of women-led startups grow manifold in the years to come. Like twins that mirror each other's moves, business today is also moving in higher gear in this 30th anniversary year. The magazine has a reader base of more than 1.7 million. It's now much more than just a magazine. There's also businesstoday.in in our digital destination that has a wide reach with more than 12 million page views and 7 million registered users. We also have 1.5 million YouTube subscribers, 1.1 million Twitter followers, and more than 100,000 followers on Instagram. And then there is Business Today show on India Today TV. This new spread of Business Today across multiple media platforms allows Business Today brand to reach consumers of content across age, segment, and user preferences. Business Today is poised to leapfrog to an entirely new level with a new dynamic leadership and a resourceful, energetic team in place. Seeing Business Today's energy, dynamism, and quality of content fills me with great pleasure and excitement about the possibilities that lie ahead for this great brand. As the Indian economy gets out of the trough caused by the pandemic, the estimate of India's GDP growth in financial year 2021-22 range between 8.5% and 9.5%, signaling the high growth return. Hopefully the war in Ukraine won't derail us. Also, the government's push on infrastructure, and hearing the words privatization is like music to my ears from the government. I haven't heard this in 46 years I have been in journalism. Therefore, I am highly optimistic about the Indian economy. We're a nation of entrepreneurs. There's nothing we can't achieve as long as the government remains an enabler. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Puri. And now I'd like to announce the Most Powerful Women in Business Awards. And before the gentlemen get too comfortable, we'd actually love to have you back on stage, Mr. Puri, Mr. Kotak, Minister Thackeray, to give out the awards to the distinguished winners tonight. All right. I'd like to start off, and she's amidst us in the audience today, Neerja Birla, founder and chairperson, Empower. Almost overnight, we saw a situation where in the world, millions needed support to deal with the impact of mental health issues. Something that impacts everyone, no matter what background. Neerja continues to strive towards the goal of opening more centers and impacting more lives. Ladies and gentlemen, Neerja Birla. Mahua Acharya, CEO, CESL, a subsidiary of Energy Efficiency Services Limited, a JV of PSUs under the Ministry of Power. Her mandate is to use her 2-decade-long experience in green finance, renewables, carbon markets to help achieve its 100 gigawatt solar power target by 2022. A big round of applause, Mahua Acharya. Aparna Purohit, Head of India Originals, Amazon Prime Video. With close to 20 million subscribers in India, Amazon Prime Video is focused on creating something for everybody across genres, geographies, languages, And Purohit is at the forefront of driving that change. She has the opportunity to make a difference in the creative ecosystem of the country in more ways than one. Ashima Goyal, member RBI MPC. In 2017, the government appointed her part-time member of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, where she rubbed shoulders with economists like Vivek Debroy, Ratin Roy, and Surjit Balla. She is now part of the RBI's 6-member Monetary Policy Committee, playing a big role in setting interest rates in the country. Dipali Goenka, CEO and Joint Managing Director, Wellspun India. Dipali has been instrumental in transforming Wellspun from textile manufacturer to a billion-dollar global home textile leader. She's delivered the highest ever revenues for Wellspun, all through challenging times that we faced during COVID, as well as taking care of the safety of Wellspun's 20,000 plus workforce. Dipali Goenka. Dipali may have left. Hina Nagarajan, MD and CEO, Diageo India. Hina is one of the few women leaders in the alcobev industry. At Diageo, she's in charge of its massive India operations involving 3,261 direct employees, thousands of business partners, growing its 27,000 crore top line and firmly establishing it as a brand in the country's consumer goods market. Hina Nagarajan. Jyoti Deshpande, CEO, Viacom 18. She's part of an industry, as we heard from her earlier today, at the cusp of phenomenal growth. And she's been working with industry captains, as well as the government and custodian of brands that are looking to leverage the confluence of technology, content, and distribution to move the needle rapidly towards the $100 billion industry. Monica Shergill, Netflix's Vice President Content, says getting reluctant auteurs like Sanjay Leela Bhansali to join the digital medium was among her biggest achievements. As per research reports, Netflix has 20% of the country's OTT market, and she has been instrumental in driving its top line and market share. Dr. Priya Abraham, Director, ICMR, National Institute of Virology. Priya took over the reins just 2 months before the pandemic struck. From handling logistics, to testing kits, to testing labs, to keeping an eye on emerging variants, her and her teams enabled India to make huge strides in the direction of curbing the speed of the virus. They were at the helm of also supervising vaccine trials here in India. A big hand for Dr. Priya Abraham. Monica, we would love to have you on stage. We just announced you. Great to see you here with us. Monica Shergill, everyone, Vice President Content, Netflix India. Could I also have Mridul Gupta, CEO, CoinDCX, to come on stage as we give out the next round of awards? It's very exciting for me to announce Priya Nair today because just a couple of days ago, she was promoted to Global CMO Beauty and Wellness at HUL. A huge round of applause. Such a pleasure to have her in the room. We know she's always jet setting. Handles 40% of the 45,000 crore business of HUL. She's been with them 30 years, champion for building future skills, and has led some path-breaking marketing initiatives. Suparna Mitra, CEO, Watches and Wearables Division, Titan Company. She has a responsibility of managing the 4,000 crore Titan Company's Watches and Wearable Division. On her shoulders since 2020, it's rapidly grown from just a few dozen stores in that time, all omni-channel enabled, boosting online sales to 17% of the total now. Thank you, Mridul, for joining us on stage. Could I also invite Parizad of KPMG India to also come up for the next round of awards? She's left. Okay, Parizad's no longer with us. Vibha Padalkar, MD and CEO, HDFC Life. She believes the pandemic helped her company emerge only stronger because of its underlying digital DNA. And proof of the pudding, HDFC Life's profits rose from 1,295 crores to 1,360 crores in that fiscal. Vinita Singh, co-founder and CEO, Sugar Cosmetics. Sugar, which is an estimated 130 crore revenue for FY21, hit an annual run rate of 500 crores as of November, with more than 1 million app downloads on iOS and Android and 1.7 million plus Instagram followers. The brand also has retail touchpoints in 35,000 plus outlets and raised $21 million in Series C funding early last year. Could I also invite Ishika Jain, Director, GM Modular, to join us on stage for the next round of awards? Vishaka RM, MD and CEO, India First Life Insurance. From 130 crore annually in 2015, the business has grown to 100 crore plus a month. Under her leadership, the youngest entrant in the market, which ranks 10th among 23 insurance companies and among the top 5 in claim settlement. And her next big target, to get the company listed. Amira Shah, Managing Director, Metropolis Healthcare. She took a personal debt in 2015 to up her stake in Metropolis from 36 to 63%. In the next few years, the company listed. She paid back the debt. Today, Metropolis is valued at 16,000 crores, up from 2,000 crores in 2015. And to take the award on Amira's behalf, Ishita Midakar, CHRO, Metropolis. Arundhati Bhattacharya, Chairperson and CEO, Salesforce. Thank you, Ishika. Arundhati was the first woman chief of India's biggest bank, SBI. She retired only to bounce back in 3 years. At Salesforce, she leads its presence in India, doubling headcount within a year. And despite new industry, with the same passion, she's still very much one of the most powerful women in business in India today. Juliana Makwan, Salesforce, is here with us to take the award on her behalf. Meena Ganesh, CEO and MD, Porsche Medical. Meena has been particularly active at Porsche, spreading to 30 cities, up by 10 during the pandemic, taking critical care of people at home. Porsche sees 30 to 40% growth in the next few years, including strategic M&As. That's the kind of vision and growth that they have in mind. To collect the award, Suniti Sharma of Porsche Medical. Congratulations. MD and CEO, Edelweiss. Radhika manages assets worth 65,000 crore rupees, only 1 out of 40 mutual fund houses that has a woman CEO. She has a YouTube video gone viral called The Girl with a Broken Neck. Some of you can look that up later. And the fund house, again, really powered the digital technology in order to continue to thrive during the pandemic. Let me welcome Shalaka Kagatra, Head of Communications at Edelweiss, to collect the award. Radhika has also taken on the role of Vice Chairperson at AMPI. Rekha Menon, Chairperson and Senior Managing Director, Accenture. This year's only entrant to the BT's Most Powerful Women Hall of Fame, an exclusive club of 7-time winners of the MPW Awards. During the pandemic, she introduced several initiatives such as medical care at home, hospitalization support for Accenture, and also contributed in raising funds for India's fight against the pandemic. Accenture was the first in its industry to announce vaccination cover for all 250,000 plus employees and eligible dependents. She also accelerated the company's shift to digital, providing growth. Let me welcome Harsha Almad, AI Transformation and Change Lead Accenture, to collect this award. Rekha is also the first woman to be appointed as the chairperson of NASSCOM as of this March. Roshni Nadar, Chairperson, HCL Technologies. And I think Roshni has also sent us a message. I'm going to actually first play that out.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much to the Business Today team for this recognition. I feel honored and humbled to share this platform with all the wonderful women who are making their mark in business and policy. The fact that they have been doing this in what has probably been the toughest global economic environment is even more remarkable. Today, women are at the forefront of driving transformative changes across all fields. Recognitions like these are a true celebration of their achievements and leadership. Thank you so much once again, and I hope you have a lovely evening. Hello.
A billionaire, a philanthropist, and looked to clock double-digit revenue growth as a leading businesswoman. To collect the award, Jill Khoury, CMO at HCL Technologies. Upasana Taku, co-founder MobiKwik. She's the queen of mobile payments. We see 300 million Indians transact, and 100 million of those are on MobiKwik's platform. Upasana's headed towards IPO. And to collect the award on her behalf tonight, Reshma Chotani, Head of Banking Alliances at MobiKwik. Vinati Saraf, MD and CEO, Vinati Organics. And to collect the award, it gives me great pleasure to invite Vinod Saraf, Executive Chairman, and Kavita Saraf. Today, the company is the world's largest manufacturer of both chemicals, leapfrogged since she took over. When she joined the company in 2006, it had revenues of 20 crores. This fiscal, she expects 1,600 crores and a market cap at over 19,000 crores. I'd like to, in fact, invite all winners. Mr. Saraf, do stay on. I'd like to invite all winners to take a picture with our esteemed guests, Mr. Puri, Mr. Kotak, and Minister Thackeray. If I could have all the winners on stage, it's so phenomenal to have you all in the same room. A big round of applause, please, for all of our wonderful power ladies here today. And do bring your trophies with you as well. Neerja Birla, Mahua Acharya, Aparna Purohit, Ashima Goyal, Hina Nagarajan, Monica Shergill, Dr. Priya Abraham, Priya Nair, Suparna Mitra, Vibha Padalkar, Vinita Singh, Vishakha RM. Thank you all for being such a wonderful audience. And to bring the presentation part of the evening to a close before, of course, we move to dinner and drinks, I'd like to invite on stage Alok Nair, our Chief Revenue Officer at Business Today, for a vote of thanks.
Good evening, ladies, and of course, gentlemen. It's been a privilege and an honor hosting all of you all. Thank you so much for making time out and gracing the 18th edition of Most Powerful Women, which has been a flagship platform for ideas and exchanges in terms of women entrepreneurship and their role in the Indian economy. Some very insightful discussions this evening, and I would really like to thank you all. I would like to thank our partners for bringing this event together, CoinDCX, GM Modular, and of course KPMG. And also, may I please request you to give a big round of applause to all the winners and the women who made it to the list, and also to our spectacular team for putting this excellent show this evening. Thank you so much.
Complicated concept like cryptocurrencies explained simply.
Let's get started. How to research before investing.
How blockchain works.
Hopefully going to answer all your questions for you.
Investments in crypto assets are subject to volatility, market, and other risks. Please research carefully before investing. Terms and conditions of the exchange apply.
Business Today Most Powerful Women in Business. 19 years later, India Inc. is producing more winners than ever before. As India opened up, so did opportunities for women entrepreneurs and managers. Today, it's a brilliant agglomeration of promoters, executives, and even regulators, creating a unique and a much welcomed challenge for business today. More and more contenders showed up for the honors every year. In 2011, we introduced the Business Today Most Powerful Women Hall of Fame. This year, the list has been expanded to 52 names. Meanwhile, the power of the awards has attracted the world's leading women CEOs as chief guests over the years. Sarah Matthew, Chairman and CEO of Dun & Bradstreet. Meg Whitman, the then CEO, eBay. Indra Nui, Chairperson and CEO, Pepsi. Ellen Kullman, Chair of the Board and CEO, DuPont. Chua Sok Kung, Group CEO of Singtel. Ursula Burns, Chairman and CEO, Xerox Corporation. Padma Shri Warrior, Chief Technology and Strategy Officer, Cisco Systems Inc. Heather Bresch, CEO, Mylan, all have graced India's most power-packed awards. Awards highly regarded and coveted by the most powerful women in India.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and the bar is open.